Well, great to have everybody tuning in. This is another episode of Cyber Coast to Coast. I'm Scott Schober on the East Coast, and I am joined here by my brother from the West Coast. How you doing there, Craig?
Hey everyone, I'm doing well, and I'm like Scott said, I'm on the West Coast, and we've got three more great stories for you today.
Excellent, excellent. Well, why don't we just to set the stage, want to just remind everybody and thank our sponsor, Dark Kryptonite. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. To learn more about some of the great stuff that Dark Kryptonite is doing, please visit their website, www.darkkryptonite.com, and kryptonite is with a C. So again, we thank our sponsors. Normally, Craig, we start out each week with a little teaser or mention that we're going to cover a cyber tip of the week. And I was thinking this week, wanted to stray from that slightly because we have a really good recommendation, which in itself is not exactly a tip, but it kind of helps everybody get educated and raise awareness and at the same time have some fun. And what I wanted to do was do a shout out for a great book that I just did a video book review, and I encourage people to check it out. The book is entitled The Hacker's Movie Guide. It's the complete list of hacker and cybersecurity movies that was written by Steve Morgan and his son Connor Morgan, both colleagues at Cybercrime Magazine, Cybersecurity Venture. And it was really a great book. And I think you also had a chance to take a look at it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, but we don't want to give away too much because number one, we want you to go out to Amazon and pick up a copy of the Hacker's Movie Guide. It was just released this week. And it's really an interesting read, and you learn a lot. And I think it opened my eyes to a lot of great hacker and cybersecurity movies that maybe have slipped by me from years ago that are very interesting. And throughout the book, there's some awesome quotes from different cybersecurity influencers and leaders. And I encourage you to check it out because you get to read their pick of the movie and why. And I had the privilege of being quoted there, sharing my favorite movie. Again, I'm not going to give it away. I'd like you to pick up a copy of the book, The Hacker's Movie Guide. But what's your take on it as you went through it, Craig?
I think it's a great resource because sometimes there's so many movies and TV shows out there to watch now. It's like we're inundated with content, and that makes it hard to pick something when you have the whole world in front of you. But every once in a while, you feel like a genre driven choice. And so this is perfect because if you're in the mood for hacker movies, you just thumb through the book, and you could do a random thumb, I'm feeling lucky kind of thing, and just whatever you stop at, you watch. Or you could go to you could do it by year. You could go to all of the expert opinions in there. There's like dozens of these cybersecurity experts, former hackers, people that work for the government, for private corporations, all kinds, and you could see what they recommend. So there's a lot of angles to get kind of what you need. And I think that's important. And I was struck by, just going through the book myself, I was struck by how many movies, first of all, are considered hacker movies. Now, they're playing a little loose with the definition, but if you think about it, each one, it really is a hacker movie because it always involves a main character trying to get something, whether it's social engineering or just a keyboard jockey and they're sitting there in their basement, whatever it is. There's always a main character that's trying to hack into something, trying to get something out. And these movies are all feature those people. And when they do that, it helps you step inside the mind of a hacker. You could see what really drives them. And I think that's always fun to see characters like that portrayed in movies.
Yeah, good point. And I think one other thing that's kind of interesting, and I stand out and people will recognize the name, is that Steve Wozniak, he wrote the foreword for the book, and he did a really nice job. And it kind of, to me, it sets the stage. And obviously, if you haven't heard it from him, well, I'm surprised. But Steve Wozniak is the co-founder of Apple, and he's just a tech genius. He's a hacker, old school hacker. So again, I think it'll be nice if you have a chance to not just pick up the book, Hacker's Movie Guide, but also read the forward and reflect upon that before you dive right in there, and it'll give you a little bit further appreciation for it.
Yeah, and just to add before we move on, that's one of the things too I appreciated about it, because the movies go back all the way to like the 50s. They start at
Yeah.
with what they consider kind of hackerish movies, and it's almost a generational thing, because hacker used to be have a positive connotation. Woz, he doesn't. I mean, he knows obviously there's bad hackers out there, but he considers himself, he proudly proclaims himself to be a hacker, because to him hacking is what good guys did. It's what people did to have fun, to expand their mind, to learn about computers and all those things. And so if you come at the book from maybe a younger generation, I think you're going to be influenced to see hacking as only a bad thing, because all the headlines are only that involve hackers are only bad things. It's you never hear about the good things hackers do, and that's too kind of complex to get into now. But we as people in the industry ourselves and involved with the media, we understand why that is.
Yeah.
So I think it's great for older people to come in and see what's going on with new hacker movies. Maybe they haven't been keeping up to the new movies, and it's great for younger people who don't quite know the origins of hacking as a term and as a hobby, as a profession. You kind of get it both ways. So I think it's a great bridge between those sort of generations.
Yeah, yeah, I really like that's a great point. I was thinking because we know a lot of people, and I help a lot of people at the university level, because I work with Kane University in Central New Jersey there on the foundation board and the cybersecurity advisory board. So I'm always trying to encourage students and those that are looking for exciting careers to look at cybersecurity. So if you're a new student going to college, thinking about, hey, I'm in computer science, or thinking about cybersecurity, man, this is a great book that really helps steer you to different movies that will help you maybe grow in that passion that you have for cybersecurity. Or maybe you're working already and you're going from a particular certificate in a particular niche area in cybersecurity. Again, good movie that will help open your eyes, or I'm sorry, a good book that will help open your eyes to different movies that are related to your fields of interest. So yeah, definitely take a look. It's a good read. Well, let's jump right into our first story here. That comes from the Hacker News, and it's entitled "Critical Chipsets Bugs Open Millions of Android Devices to Remote Spying." And this is kind of interesting, because throughout this particular story, Craig,
Mhm.
are very large companies that are affected by these type of things, not to mention the huge user base. And the part that I found most interesting, well, maybe to set the stage first, the researchers, they found three vulnerabilities in Qualcomm and MediaTek mobile chips that may leave millions of these Android users vulnerable to a type of spying. And it was tied in with the audio decoders, specifically there. And the way it works in a general sense is they could use this to carry out remote code execution attacks. And that allows the attacker to gain control over the specific targeted device, the user's data, and included streaming from the camera, or gaining access to conversations and media and things like that. So it all rooted from the audio coding format. And the part that stood out to me, this was actually developed and released as open source by Apple Computer back in 2011. And I guess it was titled Apple Lossless Audio Codec. But this was really open source that they put out. But since then, Apple really kind of created a proprietary version of code that they used and developed and implemented into their hardware. And they don't use this anymore. However, other companies such as Qualcomm here and MediaTek actually use this old code, this old open source. And guess what? How often do you think this old open source code since 2011 has been patched or upgraded for possible vulnerabilities?
Zero.
Goose egg. Yes. What does that tell you as a user that has a device with these Qualcomm chipsets in there?
Oh, yeah, I don't
I'm in
this,
trouble, right? I don't
yeah,
know.
this kind of it's disturbing. I'm not sure of the full details. I looked through the story. I think Apple still uses this codec in their devices, I believe, but I think in their devices it's not really a vulnerability because of the kind of sandbox nature of Apple devices. When you use these chips, I mean, I'm speaking out of ignorance because I don't know the specifics of this story or this exploit. But this is only affecting Androids, and it's a hardware vulnerability, right? It's chips, a Qualcomm chipset, and what's the other one? MediaTek or
Yeah,
something like that.
MediaTek there.
Yeah, these
Yeah. Well, if you,
processors.
I was going to say at the end of the article there, Craig, if you notice, it talks about Apple's lossless audio codec,
Right.
ALAC for short there. So Apple does have a version of it, but they have their own proprietary version of it, and that's the
I see.
version that
It's
through the years they've been patching and solving all of these discovered security flaws.
right.
However, they haven't done is gone back to the open source version and shared that with the general public. So their competitors basically that are using this on the
Yeah.
cheap, guess what?
This is
Surprise.
I mean, there's a lot of angles to approach this from. I mean, you have open source versus
Mhm.
proprietary. You have this kind of prioritization that Apple does. They're famous for this. They'll we saw the same thing with we're actually in fact we're seeing it now with AirTags, and that thing. People are complaining about the Android app that they wrote,
Yes.
because they prioritize their own resources, their own code, their own codecs, in fact, within their own operating system. But when it comes to writing code or writing programs outside of Apple's own ecosystem, famously, everyone hates, at least this is what I hear. I never used a Windows version of iTunes back in the day, but everyone says it's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And Apple says, well, it gets the job done, and we don't prioritize it because
Sure.
we're interested in selling our products to our customers, and we kind of don't care about Windows people. We don't care about Android people. I mean, they don't say that, of course, but their actions speak those words to me.
Yeah.
And it's understandable for a business to prioritize, but when it comes to security and you don't prioritize, it's a scary thing. But again, this is open source, and so where was the open source community looking into all of these things? One of
Yeah.
the reasons why these companies do this, I think, is because they could say, well, it's open source, and then they wipe their hands and walk away from it and
Mhm.
let the community kind of take it to the next level. Let the community check for bugs and flaws, and let the community suggest updates. And then who's ever using their open source, they're not paying for the right to use that, so it's up to them to fix the security flaws themselves. So I mean,
Yeah.
do you blame Apple in this case? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. And I guess the vulnerability was proved out by Checkpoint, which was very well known in the world of cybersecurity. And I tried to just relate to this when I first looked at the story and thought years back, many years back in the days of 3G technology. I remember we developed a pilot scanner for CDMA, and it demodulated. And we had a really, really exciting product, and we were selling it. And I remember our competitor, our fierce competitor at the time, which I won't mention, um, was taking some flack because their offering was subpar in comparison to ours, and we had a really strong sales year plus. And I remember one of our sales people at the time, long since retired, but he approached the competitor and he said, "Hey, we've got this great product. You got to have it." And the irony of it was they said, "Okay, great. We'd like to license the board from you and put it in our own box and sell it." And we said, "Okay." But what did we sell them? We didn't sell them the exact same version. We sold it with slightly inferior performance because we knew we were creating a competitor.
Mhm.
And they did the test, they accepted it, and we're okay. But we still built the top end premier product against our competitor. And maybe that's kind of what's happening here. Apple says, yeah, you could use the code, have the code, it's open source, whatever. We're not going to support and patch it. And if you run into problems, hey, you're on your own. And that's exactly what looks like happened here. Um, and I should point out, because they have a nice quote in here, they detail it a little bit more from some of the research Checkpoint put out, and they commented that the vulnerabilities were easily exploitable. A threat actor could have set their song or media file, and when played from a potential victim, it could have injected the code in the privileged media service. The threat actor could have seen what the mobile phone user sees on their phone. So, yeah, it's a concerning threat, and I think it's interesting how this came out. And I guess one of the particular integrated circuits, the processors, was from Qualcomm, the chipsets, and the other two were actually from MediaTek, another company. So it's kind of interesting how those flaws were exposed and brought out. And again, I always commend people, and even our customers, Craig, we get people that will call up and they'll say from time to time, fortunately it doesn't happen too often, hey, we found a bug in your software. Or sometimes it could be firmware slash hardware, depending upon what it is. And we're proud in the past 50 years. What do we always brag? Hey, we'll fix that for free for life, because that puts the onus on us to do the best job we can in development to make it the best product, as bug free as possible. So from time to time, people will approach us and find a bug, and hey, it's our job to fix it and do right by the customer. And in this case, maybe Apple turned their head a little bit, or just didn't want to get involved in it because it's a lost leader. They're not going to make money supporting 11-year-old open source code. It kind of reminds me of what we hear all the time with Microsoft and old legacy Windows systems, and they don't provide security patches and things, but they're transparent and say, hey, we no longer supporting it as of this date. And that instantly creates a business opportunity. Hey, upgrade to Windows 10, upgrade to Windows 11, so on and so forth. So I think consumers just need to be aware of that if they don't upgrade and they stick with old legacy products, or in this case with open source things, they don't have the same assurance that it will be secure.
Right. And the companies don't have those incentives to get on top of fixing it. So
yeah, interesting stuff. All right,
buyer
good.
beware.
Yeah, buyer beware. Well said. Let's jump into our second story here. But first, I do just want to thank our sponsor. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. If you want to learn more, visit their website, darkkryptonite.com, and Kryptonite with a C. We thank our sponsors for allowing us to have this airtime here and to build up our great listening audience. So our next story, Craig, comes from Dark Reading. And this one talks about Lenovo laptops and 3 flaws that are presented in Lenovo laptops can give attackers a way to drop highly persistent malware have been found, and hackers are capable of evading methods to remove it. So it's kind of a little bit of a nightmare, maybe perfect storm. And did you notice how many different types of Lenovo computer laptops are affected here?
Oh, geez, 100 different. That's a lot of models.
Did you even know they had that many models? I never knew it. I know there was a lot of them, but I didn't know that many.
Yeah, I guess they go back a ways, and they probably come out with a couple dozen a year. Who knows? I mean, the both of us are so out of that, consumer world of the PC that, it's hard to believe that you can come out with that many. You have that many models currently on the market even.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess to point out for this, if you are a Lenovo consumer that has bought a laptop or has an older laptop, we apologize. But I'm glad we're at least able to maybe enlighten you a little bit so you can take some action. But it's really a firm level vulnerability that the attackers are using to attack with the specific malware. And they mentioned two of the vulnerabilities, and you can get more details certainly in the story, involve unified extensible firmware interface drivers that were meant for use only during the manufacturing process. So that clearly tells me the intent is really for internals. And a lot of companies do that. We too do this. We have some test modes and some special firmware that's used for testing and exhausting maybe a hardware module in a device that we make. And it helps to reduce just the labor in a physical person going through step by step and testing. It's almost a form of automated testing to really get any kinks and bugs out from device to device. And in this case, when you're producing, hundreds of thousands or millions of laptops, it does make sense to have those type of things built in. And the third vulnerability is a memory corruption bug and a function for detecting and logging system errors. The part that kind of again caught my ear is, wow, did they just find out about this yesterday? Well, they found out about these vulnerabilities last year, back in October, and they just recently updated the drivers. So there was a little maybe delay or latency there.
Yeah, it's like a 7 month. I mean,
Yeah,
I understand. I'm sure they wanted to take their time and properly patch or, fix this firmware bug, but that is a long time. And I don't know, when did they alert their users to this? Were people still buying laptops with this faulty firmware in there? And then now you go a couple months, and then suddenly you find out like, oh, I have to, now I have to patch my BIOS with I need a BIOS update. It's not a trivial thing. I mean, I suppose Lenovo made it easy enough. They've released they have the BIOS updates on their website, but you got to know about that. So they should be alerting people to this. I'm assuming they're doing that. And you have to, install the update, which isn't the easiest thing. It's not as easy as a software update,
exactly.
put it that way.
Yeah, and I do think there is a bit of a disconnect when you think about it. When people buy a traditional laptop, it's a consumer buy. It's done over Amazon or at Best Buy or Costco or who knows, wherever they get it. So it's going through several hands. The traceability and the ability to reach out and connect with the end user or customer is not always there. So when the customer finds out too late that there's malware on their laptop, and they're trying to get it off and they don't know what happened and they lost this and that, they end up going back down the channel and maybe back to the original manufacturer. So in other words, it's bad when your customer calls you. You prefer to be able to reach out and say, hey, Foul, we made a mistake, sorry about this, but here's a patch, here's an update, here's an enhancement, a fix, whatever. You do good in the customer's eyes. But sometimes if it's done 6 months later, the customer's upset, they lost a ton of data and time and money, and now they're mad. Now it becomes a brand issue. Do they want to go back to Lenovo and have it fixed, or they just want to throw their laptop in a dumpster and go buy a new one?
Yeah, and we can attest to this. I at least I can, as far
Yep.
as the marketing for Berkeley. I mean, it happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough to annoy me. We get a customer who's a purchaser, and they'll order something, but yet the product gets shipped to a completely different address, and the end user is a person they've never met and never had any communication with. And that's common in the B2B world.
Yeah.
But it makes my job and our engineer and support staff job difficult, because sometimes it's a bug fix, sometimes it's just a feature that we want the customer to know about, but we don't have their information because we never shipped it directly to the end user, or we never got their phone number or their email. And so you have to rely on the person who bought it and sent it to them to convey this vital information. And you're playing the telephone game.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And unfortunately, it can get frustrating, and you can easily move on. The customer loyalty these days, and we're very fortunate. We've been in business for 50 years, and we're always prideful in saying that we do work hard, not just for the big customers, but for every customer, not just now, but hopefully so they come back, because we have many repeat customers over the decades that I've been here at Berkeley, and you've been here, that do come back and say, hey, I was at this company, and now I have a new company or a startup, or I'm the president of this company. And they remember us. They come back, and oftentimes it's because they say, because of your customer service, when there was a problem, you addressed it, you fixed it, you communicated it. And I think that's fundamentally what all companies need to do, is to be able to have that line of communication up where you can just talk freely and get things resolved, because nobody likes to dwell on problems. They want to move on to, find the solution and move on to the next thing that they've got to deal with. Good.
That's it. Speaking of moving on,
Let's move on. All right. And finally, last but not least, we're going to shift over to Bleeping Computer. But just as a friendly reminder, we want to thank our sponsor for Cyber Coast to Coast, Dark Kryptonite. Dark Kryptonite stops ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. Reach out and check out their website. Pick up the phone and give them a buzz. But if you want to reach them on the website, darkkryptonite.com, and it's kryptonite with a C. So we thank our sponsor, Dark Kryptonite. Well, this next story here is coming from Bleeping Computer, as I mentioned. FBI BlackCat ransomware breached at least 60 entities worldwide. This is pretty interesting, right? And I've heard the name BlackCat ransomware gang several times in several different stories over the past few months. So they're certainly becoming a well-known entity in the world of cyber crimes. And the immediate standout, before I even say anything else, the fact that they mention they breached the networks of at least 60 organizations worldwide. That's a pretty big number when we think about it. I don't think a lot of these ransomware gangs can attribute to that level of success, because usually they end up getting caught. They get greedy, they brag on social media, and eventually they get caught. So just the fact that they could already attribute to over 60 organizations worldwide, some of which they admit and they want to take credit for, some of which the FBI, I think, has done some great work, and they're hunting them down one by one, these poor companies that are getting attacked and held ransom, and working with them to resolve the ransom. And also at the same time, they're trying to help companies prevent being victims of ransomware attacks by best practices in education and tips that they are sharing. So I certainly say thank you to the FBI for doing what they can do, but they've got a tall order to get through some of these, that's for sure. Now, the essence of the story here, do you want to jump in there, Craig, or do you want me to kind of
well, I was
share
gonna
some thoughts?
I was gonna say the technical nitty gritty of it didn't interest me as much as the kind of rebranding that's going on in here. If you scroll down the story a little further, it seems that BlackCat is a fairly new brand for this ransomware gang, which was formerly known as, or I guess still known as, Dark Side, also Black Matter. And so you have all these kind of brand shifting going on, and apparently there's some denial that these are one and the same from this Lockbit ransomware gang, who that's named after the ransomware program Lockbit. But it just all comes back to this idea of ransomware as a service, and it's becoming more and more of it appears to be a legitimate business model, the same way you have software as a service is a legitimate business model for legitimate businesses out there. And I just think it's funny how when success comes, the rebranding continues. That it's almost like, hey, we're criminals, and we're demanding ransom, and we're holding infrastructure hostage and all that, but we're pivoting. We want to rebrand, and we want the world to know that we're pivoting in this direction now. So we're not the old ransomware that we're not your father's ransomware. we're the new generation of ransomware, and we're going to do it as a service, and you can work with us even though we're scumbag criminals and we should be in jail.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess their claim to fame, BlackCat, which is also, I guess, known as ALPHV. I don't know if it's Alpha or whatever
I saw. Yeah, it's another brand, kind
strange.
of.
Yet another brand. They claim to fame is they're the first ransomware group to successfully use Rust, which is considered to be a more secure programming language that offers improved performance and reliable concurrent processing. So, again, technology and advances in these type of ransomware attacks, they're constantly developing and evolving and growing in sophistication, harder to detect, harder to find the decryption keys and a back door to work around. So if you're law enforcement working with, a company, it's getting harder and harder. So I think when companies do share, and I encourage this, when you realize, the moment you realize, oh no, I think we're a victim of ransomware attack, you do need to take steps kind of quick and respond to that. Be it unplug from the internet, be it, don't start to monkey around and try to do a backup at that time or anything else. Call the local law enforcement, get in touch. If it's a big enough situation, the FBI gets involved right away. They may give you some specific steps, and more importantly, they may actually give you decryption keys, because they may have the latest and greatest decryption keys for that particular strain of ransomware that'll get you out of the woods immediately. Obviously, back up your data, back up your data, back up your data. We always tell people, and have an immutable backup that can't be deleted or modified, that you keep off premise, lock in a fire safe or something, or make sure you have a good, secure cloud backup that is properly encrypted, that nobody could monkey with. But ransomware is still a huge problem. It's growing. It hasn't shrunk, unfortunately. So I think we just have to look at these companies. They're rebranding and growing, and they're capitalizing on this, taking in more and more money. It's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. So it's really, really important for all of us just to be aware of this, the latest threats, and to be able to react and share that information to law enforcement, because it helps you ultimately, but it also helps other companies that are being targeted and victimized.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Trying to think, is there anything else we wanted to cover on this story? I think we covered the essence of it. The scope and size is pretty amazing, and I think it's just important, again, just to try to follow those type of tips. And one other thing I was talking to somebody about the other day: if you are a victim of ransomware, there are some things you want to just kind of like immediately do. And I never even thought about this. This is more on the physical end, but grab a notebook and write down some details. And what do I mean by that is all the details you can write down, because once this becomes an investigation with law enforcement or FBI, they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions, and some of it may be confidential, but to have it all in one place is really handy. So if you write down, obviously some of your passwords they may need access to, but even when the events happened, how did you discover it? Which computer was it discovered on? When was your last backup? Where does that reside? What type of intellectual property do you have? What are your crown jewels? What are the things valuable to you and your organization that you're trying to protect?
Mhm.
To what extent has your information possibly been out there in the wild? How long? And the stuff in the database, so on. So there's lots and lots of questions, but it's good to take a notebook, and jot down some of these things. Why? Because when you sit down with law enforcement, you can be transparent and share this information. The more you give to them, the more likely they're going to be able to help you. And it may be the FBI. It may also be a third party that's brought into this, be it by you, the FBI, or together, that needs to know a lot of this information so they can do the forensics and the investigation. So making their job easier will ultimately help you, and possibly get your data back sooner, and avoid paying that dreaded ransom that they'll have the gun to your head.
Yeah, it is a good tip. And it's, there's a reason why when you watch these procedurals, whether it's the FBI or the police, on TV or the movies, there's always the moment when the victim is asked a question that seems like it comes out of the blue. And it's
Yeah.
always because what investigators try to do is they're trying to piece together, because, of course they're coming at it from a perspective. They don't know anything usually, except evidence that's really right out in front of them. But what they're trying to also do is to kind of jog the memory of the victim, because there's a lot of things that you do, especially if it's a company and it involves a lot of people. I mean, think about it. What if you recently hired a new person there? That
Sure.
person could become a suspect. Maybe they planted the ransomware. There's all these things that you don't think about right away. You're only picturing your kind of computer in your mind. You're thinking about your relationship to that and your schedule and the last time I logged in and stuff like that, when there might be other people that had access to it. There might be other little whether circumstantial little tidbits that could weigh heavily on the outcome of that investigation and point the investigators into a completely different direction. So you want to put all options on the table, all possibilities on the table when you're first starting out this. And I think one of the best ways to do that is, like you say, write it all down, because as we know, when you sit down and physically write it down or type it out, usually you write a lot more things than you first initially thought you were going to write down.
Sure.
And so one memory can unlock another memory, and so on and so on. And soon you have like a mini little journal of all your activities from the past day, week, or month. And that stuff is invaluable to investigators.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very important. So I think working closely with them it's imperative. And downtime is expensive. And obviously the larger the organization, the more on the network, the more sensitive the data might be it in the healthcare or financial sector, but time is of the essence. So you got to really, the more information you have, the more you could share with them, the better chance to remediate it and recover and get back to business as usual. So, all right. Well, that kind of wraps us up. I just want to again thank our sponsor, Dark Kryptonite. They stop ransomware, malware, and phishing in their tracks, eliminating cybercrime, fraud, and information warfare. Dark Kryptonite utilizes advanced blockchain algorithms and zero trust models. You can learn more about Dark Kryptonite by visiting their website, darkkryptonite.com, kryptonite with a C. And certainly tell them that you were listening to a great podcast, Cyber Coast to Coast, and that's where you learned about Dark Kryptonite. We really appreciate that. And, this podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, Google, iHeart, Apple, Amazon, and many more places. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. Give our podcast a review. We really appreciate that. For questions and comments, certainly you could DM us on Twitter, and you could do that directly to myself at ScottBVS, or visit www.scottschober.com for more information. If we read your comment or question on the podcast, we'll send you your choice of a signed copy of one of our great books, Hacked Again, Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business, or Senior Cyber. Thanks again for listening, and tune in next week for another new episode packed with cyber news. We'll share some new tips, and we encourage everybody out there, stay safe. Signing off, this is Scott from the East Coast.
And signing off from the West Coast, this is Craig. Stay safe, everyone.
With your hosts, Scott and Craig Schober.